Hello and welcome to GEOSCOPE on Labour Social. I'm Graham Hughes and with me is Ollie Bowler Hatman. How you doing, Ollie? You all right? He seems to be shaking about a little bit like a lunatic there. I don't know what's going on. That's probably some problem with my internet. Yeah, I was going to say you stuck in the snow. Is that what's been going down?
No, not stuck in the snow.
It's a bit parky. It's actually not so cold in Durham, which is a bit strange. It's only like minus half a degree. Which is quite relatively tropical for Durham.
It's -2 over here at the moment. Probably going to get colder.
In deepest, darkest Yorkshire.
Yeah. So.
Have you learnt your lesson?
Probably. But never. No. It's got to deal with where you live.
Yeah, true. Okay, right. Shall we get into it? What story do you want to cover first? Should we talk about Trump or do you want to talk about what's been going on in the Red Sea?
Oh, let's start with Trump because Trump's going to have big, probably, implications to everything going forward.
Trumpelstiltskin.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as many people don't want to admit it, the chances of him coming back are quite high.
Yes, exceptionally high because he doesn't even need to win, Ollie. He can lose and still come back.
Exactly. It's one of those things where the cases out against him at the moment are being deliberately slowed down by Trump.
Yes.
Just so that he can try and make it to the presidency. And of course, if he does make it to the presidency, then
he can make it all go away.
You are sort of immune and he can technically pardon himself then, which would also, as many people have said, would cause a lot of, interesting constitutional queries and conundrums among that. And of course, why are we saying this? Well, Iowa's just happened, and Iowa, when it comes to the US presidential sort of nominations for the particular parties, Iowa is the particular deciding state. If you win big in Iowa, you've pretty much got it in the bag. And Trump won with about 58% of the vote.
I thought you only got 51% of the vote.
No, in the final counts, what I've seen, he's won 58%.
Oh, okay. But then nearly half the people didn't vote for him. Is that significant? Because if he had been president and he was running again, no one would have voted for the other people at all.
Well, this is what a lot of people are worrying about now when it comes to the US presidential elections, because you've got a lot of people that have been disillusioned by Biden. And the worry is that they don't go out and vote. Because it's people who don't go out and vote tend to be what lose it for the Democrats, unfortunately.
And Labour. And the Tories in this election coming up. It's going to be people who don't go out and vote that would have voted for the Tories or would have voted for the Democrats. That's actually what happened in 2022 when they thought there was going to be a red wave. They talked about the red wave because obviously the colours are switched in America. So Labour are blue and the Conservatives are red, it's the only country in the world that does that,
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, all other countries, the left-wing party are red because, communism. But yeah, not in ours. The fact that only half the people, well, let's say, 58%, did you say? So 42% of the people voted against Trump at this stage.
One of the things that I think will have probably affected turnout, extreme weather at the moment in Iowa.
Minus 26, I read.
It's heavily snowing.
But what did Trump say?
Affect the turnout.
Should we have a little quiz? Everyone watching, right? So what did Trump say in reaction to the extreme weather event that they're having in Iowa at the moment? Did he say, A, don't worry, it's 26 degrees, it's not that important. I'm going to win this anyway. Stay at home, stay warm, Or did he say, did he push for the caucus to be moved to another day so that they could have the vote on another day when it was warmer and it was less dangerous? Or C, did he say, go and vote for me anyway, despite the fact that it's minus 26 out, and if you die, oh well, as long as you voted for me first, that's okay.
No.
A, B, or C? Quick, vote now.
Vote now.
Vote now. You can actually do a poll. I could do a poll, but everyone knows the answer is C. It was C. My God. Just
Yep.
and
And
they're like,
this is the guy who refuses to admit that he lost because he really discouraged postal voting in 2020. So, and like
yeah.
I say, that was the story. Trump was
And he
ahead.
did tell his
Postal
supporters to
votes.
try injecting bleach up their bum or sunlight into their lungs or some
Yep.
crazy thing to combat COVID. Our version of Trump, Britain Trump, suggested sticking a hairdryer up your nose. That'll kill the COVID. I mean, there's all these doctors and scientists around the world, these people who spent their lives, researching medicine and vaccines and things, and going, shit, wish we had thought of that.
We've had enough of experts. No experts here anymore. Big on experts.
Sunlight up your ass, bleach in your lungs, hairdryer up your nose, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
So he said, go and vote, even if you might die. That's all right. And his supporters are like, is there anything he can do at this point? Do you reckon there's anything Trump can do that will put his cult off?
Probably not at this point. Trump, like I say, has 30% of the Republican Party in the bag, and while that's probably enough to get him the nomination, the question is still out on whether that will win him the nomination.
Yeah,
because it's turnout for the Democrats and it's independents and their turnout. Because Trump is not going to attract independents, and their turnout, of course, just like the Democrats, is going to be in question as well. What happens in the next election? It's honestly, at the moment, it's 50-50.
Yeah.
Like, not a lot of people want to admit it, but it's 50-50. And we've said it before, if Trump does win office, then there has to be serious thoughts into what we do, of course, in relation to sort of Ukraine, because he's not going to come support Ukraine anymore. We had of course, revelation very recently from the EU diplomats. Not only is he going to refuse to come to Europe's defense, he's categorically stated that NATO is dead. He wants to out of NATO. Now, someone in the chat is going to say, oh, but haven't they passed a law that says presidents can't unilaterally withdraw from NATO? Technically, yes and no. It will be put before the Supreme Court. Remember, the Supreme Court is controlled by Republicans.
Massively.
What do you think is going to happen if that when that decision goes forward?
They're just wibbling on about sovereignty.
Shown that they will follow him on these mad whims. And the worry is that more mad and crazy Republicans go in and decide, yes, that's a fantastic idea. So it's it's
not great, is it? I'm going to jump into the chat in a moment, but before I do, I just want to say that I think it's a good thing that at this stage it does look like Trump's going to take the nomination, and the Democrats are shitting themselves that Trump might actually win, because that's going to get the Democrat voters out. Not for love of Biden, but for fear of Trump. And you know what? Any port in the storm. That's my motto. It's actually my motto.
That is the hope that
explains a lot.
That Democrats do go, oh shit, we've got to get, Trump's. It's either Biden or Trump.
Yeah. So Tuck says, I think SpongeBob SquarePants is based on Trump. No, he's not. SpongeBob is a lovely person, whereas Trump is an absolute bloody nightmare. It's more likely that SpongeBob is actually based on a tampon, but that's another story. He lives in Bikini Bottom. Hugh says, Channel 4 news clip was good on the Rwanda Tory shambles. Many interviewed the usual suspects. I've done a video about... I was literally making a video this evening about the Rwanda scheme and the Tories voting on it. And as I was making the video, I kept on having to because I used my phone as my auto cue, and I kept on having to grab it and stop recording, change the words on the auto cue, put it back and do the whole thing again. And then I had to do it again after there was another vote. But it didn't make any much difference to the actual core of what I'd written, but it was just to, put things in the past tense rather than the future tense, things like that. But someone was asking, are there going to be 2 by-elections after Brenda Clark Smith and Lee Anderthal have quit? No, they've only quit as Tory deputy chairman. They're not quit as MPs. They are still MPs, and they still have the Tory whip as of what is it, 14 minutes past 9. So unless that gets updated while we're on air, and we will let you know, they still have the Tory whip, as does Suella Braverman, who wrote a scathing letter about Rishi Sunak and his leadership qualities. And the thing is, if Rishi Sunak's scared that they'll put in the 50 or so letters that they need to go into the 1922 committee to trigger a leadership challenge, as like Andrea Loathsome wants. Andrea Jenkins. Sorry, Andrea Jenkins wants. The thing is, if he takes the whip away from from certain MPs, they can't send a letter into the 1922 committee.
Well, he's not going to do
that. If I was him, I'd be like, right, you're losing the whip, because they lose all the privileges. I mean, you wouldn't believe how many privileges there are being a Tory MP. You got the normal ones that come of being an MP, and then you get extra ones because the Tory party is so goddamn corrupt.
But he's not, though. Rishi Sunak has proved time and time again that where he could remove the whip from people, he just won't do it. He's such a weak prime minister. But
they're still.
This Rwanda bill is going to be an absolute mess.
They're still MPs. There's MPs saying they're not going to vote for it because they don't think it's going to work and it's just going to be a load of waste of time. There's MPs who aren't going to vote for it because they don't think it goes far enough. But like someone was asking in the chat before, how much parliamentary time has been spent on this shit? Like compared with everything else, compared with stuff that needs to be sorted, the fact that no one can get a bloody dentist. I got an email off one of our viewers yesterday talking about their mum who can't get out to see a doctor because of Parkinson's and having to have the tooth filed in the house by the person, not by a dentist, because they couldn't get a dentist to come out. It would be like a 2-3 month wait if you tried to do it for your NHS doctor and then they got someone in. And if you've got a broken tooth, that's cutting your face every time you try and eat, and you can't really, Did you see the statistic about the margin between house prices and wages in the UK is the biggest gulf since the 1880s?
Yeah, it's not surprising. It is something that needs to be solved, but it's going to take a lot of solving. It's not an easy issue to solve. It's one of the things where, as we do need to build more houses, this is a crisis. We are in a housing crisis, but I would say we're more accurately in a housing disaster. We can't build our way out of it. We do need to build more houses. That is one part of it, but there's more that needs.
We need to be doing it on a war footing
and all sorts of things, tackling landlords.
Yep. No more second homes. Use it or lose it. That has got to be a law that they need to bring in. If you have a property in the UK and it is unoccupied for a year, you lose it. That's it. Compulsory purchased. I don't care if it's in Belgravia or in Toxteth. It gets repossessed by the government or by the local council, and then they can use it as a council home. That's it. Do that, and you'd have all those houses in Belgravia. You'd have them all back. Because at the moment, you've got Rotten Row. It used to be Millionaires Row, and now it's Rotten Row because you've got these Russian oligarchs buying up these massive townhouses, these Georgian townhouses, which they're just letting fall into rack and ruin because they just bought them as investment. They don't live there. No one's looking after the place. They're falling apart. A use it or lose it clause. Back not that long ago, if you had a second property and you wrecked it on purpose and disconnected the water and pulled out all the pipes and made it uninhabitable, you paid half council tax on it. I'm like, no, but you pay double. If you've done that to your home, you pay double council tax, maybe triple. Just squeeze them till the pips squeak. As that's the other thing
to do as well. 31 Blaze as well in the comments. Add additional tax on second homes.
Yes, massive loads of tax. People don't need a second home. And it should be like dinner, You get your second helping once everyone's had their first helping. And it's such a crisis right now. We need to get real about this and stop being so protective over the rich and going, oh, but, the rich, they worked very hard for their holiday homes in Cornwall that they go to once a year for a week. And in the rest of the time, there's no one in these towns. And so the economy in Cornwall at the moment, it's like a developing nation.
Yeah.
And that's caused by second home ownerships, holiday homes.
It's most most of the coastal towns are like that. It's
no wonder they've all voted for Brexit, except for Brighton. We love you, Brighton, sweetie. Also, Scarborough. Do one. You're not far from Scarborough, are you?
No, Scarborough's
Oh,
not far.
what?
Skegness is
What?
not far either.
Oh, Skegness.
Um,
So, what do you think of Scarborough and Skegness on the one to shithole meter?
they could. This is the depressing thing about these places. They could be very, very nice places, and these areas do have a lot of stuff going for them. But
Yeah.
it's just been years of just constant neglect, and many of these areas were heavily invested in, the fishing industry, and
Yeah.
expecting that the fishing industry will last forever. But no,
Yeah.
again, times change. Industrialization has happened,
Yeah.
and it's not the fishing boats that are, mechanizing. It's the processing that's happening for the fishing industry. That's
Yeah.
where the jobs are now, more on land than on the sea in many cases.
But like what's ruined, say, probably Skegness, but definitely Scarborough, is the fact that you have a promenade which just has cars going up and down it at 60 miles an hour, like lunatics in souped up shitty Ford Fiestas with rear spoilers and alloy wheels going up and down. You're like, and so it's not pleasant. And it could be. That's the thing. A few little tweaks, they could make it quite nice. But
Transport as well. More rail
yeah,
links. More, to these places.
yeah.
There's only one train in and out to Scarborough. It's, you haven't got a choice.
Well, Skelmersdale, just outside Liverpool, that didn't have a train at all. The train was ripped up in the 1960s, just before they said, "Hey, we're going to make this a bit of a new town and put loads more people in it." And they're like, "But you just took the train line away." I'm like, "Oh, it'd be fine. I'll have a car because that'll work." Hugh said, "What happens to that squatters' law? If you live in a property for 10 years and you can prove that you've only been the only one maintaining it, you can go to court to be granted ownership for nothing." I think that's still the case. I don't know if it's 10 years, but I assume that's still the case.
I think it
But
is still the case, but yeah.
Puninator's making a good point because I say you've got to use it or lose it. You've got to use it. So you could use it for a day in a year and say, I'm definitely using it. So Puninator's saying you've got to use it for 10 months. I think that's a bit extreme. I'll say 6 months. 6 months of the year, you have to use it. You have to be there.
Yeah, it's obviously how you would prove it as well. There's, how do you prove that you've been there? That's the other thing, because you could just say, well, I've been here for last year.
Yeah, just knock on the door.
It's
how people go around knocking on the doors. Anyone here? No. Look through the letterbox, see if the post is mounting up. But also, it would encourage people who have second homes to rent them out cheaper, because it would be better for them to have someone in there renting than for them to literally lose their second house.
Yeah. Rent control, I think we've talked about this as well. I don't know where you would sort of put it power-wise, whether it would be a national government level or you would let the local council decide. I personally think you might want to let the local council decide what the sort of the rent should be, but again, that might cause problems. That might not cause problems. It just depends where that type of power sort of needs to lie. Again, whether local or national government do that type of thing. But
if we're going to have like a 2-child policy in this country, which is ridiculous considering we have a fertility rate of just 1.5, which is way below what we need to repopulate our country, naturally. And we say to people who want to have children, no, you can have 2. And we say to the people who don't want to have children, that's fine. Yeah, it's and also we say to people who have children, your childcare costs are going to be absolutely astronomical. And when your kids are in their 20s, they're more likely to be now living with you than they are having their own place, like they had in the 90s. Nowadays, people in their 20s are more likely to be living with their parents because of what the Tories have done. But we're supposed to be talking about world news, Ollie, and we seem to be distracted by the what's happening domestically, which we talk about on this channel.
Yeah, well, like I say, it's all the Trump. Oh, but a bizarre story before we go over. Did you see the fun photos of the massive black plume going up in St. Petersburg?
No.
So I didn't know this, but there's an Amazon ripoff in Russia called Wild Berries.
Yeah. Was this a fire or?
Yes, it was a fire, but how it started was the interesting part. as you know, Putin has sort of instituted conscription. Most of the areas that he's been doing it have been sort of the non St. Petersburg, Moscow areas, because that's where Putin's power base is. However, seems now they seem to be getting quite desperate, as the Russian police have been going into factories, jobs, places like this massive warehouse.
Yeah.
It's what it's absolutely massive. It's like 100,000 like square miles or something like that. It's absolutely massive. They went in, started going after people, trying to sort of conscript them, arrest them, and take them down to the conscription officers, get them
Shit.
signed up. They rioted
Okay.
when they tried to get forcefully conscripted, and the place set on fire, and the entire warehouse, this absolutely massive warehouse, got absolutely destroyed. Like, it was just all completely on fire. The entire thing was going up. Massive plumes of
I'm
black
just
smoke.
gonna
You
fade to a
you
picture
could
of it
see
there.
it for miles.
There you go. That's a
Um,
picture just come up on your screen of the
yeah.
fire in St. Petersburg. Wow. Oh my giddy ants. That is yeah. So so that was self-sabotage then.
Oh, yes. But this is the interesting part now, because it's
Guest
like,
workers.
well, how far, of course, are people gonna accept being, secretly conscripted? Especially, remember, it's an election year for Putin as well. Of course, he's going to win.
Yeah.
Of course he's going to win. But it'll be interesting to see if other things like this start to happen as well. So I'm hoping that maybe that fire might be the start of a beginning of a lot of, shall we say, self-sabotaging activities going on in Russia,
Do you
hopefully.
think that will happen?
Yeah.
Do you think there'll be more of that? Because we thought this was going to happen at the beginning. This was 2 years ago now, at the beginning of the Ukrainian the invasion of Ukraine. We thought that the Russian people would turn on Putin, but it hasn't really happened, has it? It's not really.
Well, like I say, there was at the beginning, there were protests, but they very, very quickly sort of stamped out on those protests. The thing you are getting now is the death rate. Um, when you've lost more troops in 2 years than you have in the entire US, uh, you know, um, occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan,
Yeah.
you know, and that was over a number of years. That wasn't over 2 years. That was, that's a very quick amount to lose a lot of troops. And according to the figures from the Ministry of the Defense, they're losing about 300 men a day. Um, that's a massive casualty figure.
Yeah,
So
but
they are
they've
on
got.
course within 3 years to surpass the Soviet Union's losses of what they lost in Afghanistan. So it's just losses at time and time again that they cannot cover up. And this has been a continuing, factor in this war, that the Russian people are not really being told what the true casualty numbers are. But people are starting to get affected. Everyone is starting to know someone who has been drafted, who has just disappeared, who has just stopped sending messages when they were drafted.
Yeah.
It's it's being noticed very, very much more and more because of the
Well,
sheer amount of manpower that Putin is drafting, because he's just
is
so desperate.
is the thing,
Men.
Ollie? Though, if it is 300 a day, that's only 110,000 a year. I say only. I mean, that's obviously horrific, but Russia's got a population of 140 million. Like
Yeah, but you can't
it's a
conscript
tiny
them all.
percentage. Pardon?
You can't conscript them all. Even if you sort of halve that to say, well, it's only the male population that's going to get drafted. Um, it's a number they just cannot hide them anymore.
Well, I suppose everyone will know someone. That's the
Mm.
issue there, isn't it? Do you want to see another picture of the massive plume of smoke? There
Oh
we go. I
yes,
found this one. There
yeah.
you go.
Somewhere there is
St.
there is
Petersburg.
one, and it's like taken from a longer distance. Um,
Wow. That's just crazy. Yeah, it's pretty epic.
But it was covering like the entire like St. Petersburg skyline. Um, it's insane.
I thought they were boats at the beginning. You know, those bits at the front. I forget the image back up. Those things like they look like sails, but they're not. That's the building.
Yeah.
The walls of the building. It's a shitly built warehouse in it. But they are the. So what are they called? The Amazon of
Wild
Russia.
berries. Yeah.
Wild berries. It's a very strange name. Anyway, should we jump into the chat? We've been ignoring the chat. Sorry. Moranto says, "Ooh, how thrilling." Don't know what that was about. The smoke trail was so large it could be seen from space, says Benjamin. And Canada Power says, "I think conscription is disgraceful. It's basically military slavery. No one should be forced to serve in any armed forces unless they choose to." Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Duke is saying that's still not hotter than my rage. Which is fair enough in this day and age. And there's me thinking it was an insurance job. The real story is much more interesting. No, it wasn't an insurance job. The problem is they send the better soldiers first. If people are being conscripted, these people aren't soldiers, thus easier for Ukraine to repel. That's very true. I'm surprised that Graham isn't saying the fire is due to global warming. Do I say that a lot? Do we blame a lot of things on global warming?
Well, it will contribute to global warming.
Will contribute to global warming. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, should we go to Yemen?
Yep.
Okay, over to Yemen.
Yep. Obviously, the last time we were talking about this, there had just been the largest attack to date of missiles and drones. And of course, soon after, in fact, I believe it was the next day after our last program, this is where we had strikes now back from the US and UK military aircraft.
Can I say something that might be a bit unpopular?
Yeah.
I think that we should be.
However, I think
that we
pretty
should
much
be
for this.
Oh, okay, good. Phew. I'm going to say I think we should be protecting the people at sea. That's my number one priority.
International trade.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm not too asked about trade. I'm asked about the people on the boats. That's what I'm bothered about. The actual crew of these ships. And
don't forget, you just had a US ship that got struck recently.
Yeah, yeah.
That was probably one of the most recent ones.
Yeah.
You had another one recently that was a Saudi Arabian oil tanker that was carrying oil to India. That was hit, but that wasn't hit in international waters. That was hit in Indian ocean, Indian like sea territory. And there's questions about, well, hold on a second, where did that missile actually come from? Did it come from Yemen? The Indians have sort of been asking the Iranians, where did this missile come from? Because it's a bit of a long way for it to come from Yemen.
Yeah.
But like I say, they do have these long, these long range missiles.
Jupp is saying there's a very easy way to protect the sailors without killing people. Well, I'd rather there were no people being killed at all. Yeah. But and how do you stop a rocket launcher on land from
you can't
firing rockets?
24/7 protection. You know, the Greeks are now sending in a destroyer. The Indians, after that incident, are now also sending in a destroyer as well to sort of help protect the international oceans. But going back to Ukraine, just briefly, one of the things that has shocked a lot of people, I think, is how vulnerable these international trade routes are, because Ukraine has managed to take out 25% of Russia's Black Sea fleet using sea drones that have about a 500-mile range. If you're a terrorist group now, and bear in mind, this is a deterrent being said to these Houthis to deter other terrorist organizations from going, actually, attacking international shipping might be a good idea to bring attention to our cause or try to force, something, because there are far more vulnerable spots. I mean, what is it? 12%, 12 to 15%, I think it is, of international trade goes up there, of course, to use the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
What about the Straits of Johor off Jakarta? Well, that's 30% of international trade goes through there. You could set up near Singapore, along the coastline of Indonesia, along there, with like your sea drones, and you could cripple 30% of the world's trade.
Well, there's the Malacca Straits are already,
Yeah,
which goes by Sumatra in Indonesia. It goes between Sumatra and Peninsular
and
Malaysia,
it's
and
like I
and
say, it's not
that's
just
really bad for piracy as
yeah.
things are. But they're the type of pirates who come on board and steal all the stuff that they can get a hold on.
But
Hold
like I
on,
said, this isn't
the
piracy.
Somalian
It's like
piracy was a
destroy
little
the
bit
it's like
different.
destroy the boat.
No, it was a little bit different MO because they'll get on board and kidnap the crew and hold the crew to ransom, essentially, and whatever goods were on the ship they'll be held to ransom. But yeah, this new development is just firing rockets at merchant vessels to
Yeah,
innocent people just doing their job. The majority of them are from the Philippines, but also you'll get people from Burma, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh working on these ships. It's a bit of a shit job. They don't get to see their family or friends for months and months at a time. If you work for Maersk, you're not allowed to have a drink for 6 months. They'll go 6 months without a drink at all, just in case you're in town, you've had a couple of drinks, and your ship needs to leave early. You've got to be sober, and if you're caught drunk, you lose your job.
yeah.
And so it's a difficult job, and I don't think that the people who do it are necessarily recompensed correctly for how much work they do. Obviously, the officers on board probably get are paid quite well, but the actual crew on board, not paid so well. I mean, they're paid well, probably comparatively for people in the Philippines, but if that person was from Britain, they wouldn't work for that kind of wage. And now they're putting their lives in danger again after 10, 15 years after the Somali piracy situation in the same bit of water. And so, yeah, I think they deserve protection. But, and here's my big but, I don't think that it should be the US or the UK doing it. I think it should be the UN. I think the UN should have the ability to patrol these places and make sure
Well, we've
that.
had a UN Security Council resolution. The UN Security Council actually agreed on something.
Whoa, we've had a resolution. My God. No way.
So, we've already had that, telling them time and time again up until, recently, knock it off. Stop doing this. If not, we are going to respond. And now they've responded.
Yeah.
And this is, this has to happen. This has to happen as a deterrent. Otherwise, other terrorist organizations will just turn around and just go, well, guess where we're setting up? On the Panama Canal, with some, RPGs, drones, whatever. And we're just gonna, destroy a ship on the Panama Canal, possibly blocking that for who knows how long.
I don't think the Panama Canal would be somewhere where they'll target, but certainly the Strait to Malacca.
Yeah,
I could see that.
There's all sorts of
Definitely
bottlenecks where they could go for,
yeah.
and people are like, oh no, you don't understand. It's that they're doing it to protect Gaza. Yes, we know, we understand what's happening in Gaza is bad, but this doesn't excuse them doing this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could just pretty much excuse anything if someone just says, "Oh well, I was doing it to help protect Gaza."
Yeah.
You could justify all kinds of atrocities through some of that logic that I've seen some people use to deploy this, but it is about
always
protecting international trade.
It always reminds me, and this is the same with the innocent civilians in Gaza who are being killed by the bloody Israelis. It is the equivalent of seeing someone being mugged across the road and you staying on your side of the road and punching the person next to you, and you go, why did you do that? Oh, because that person's getting mugged and needed to stop. How does that stop it in any way whatsoever? Do you know what I mean? It's just it's incredibly frustrating to be absolutely powerless and helpless watching this all unfold around the world. BUFC Mike makes a good point. Wasn't a large part of the Somali piracy due to overfishing in their native waters, reducing to the point where they can't catch enough to eat? Yes. It's quite simply yes. And that's why the two people I met when I was traveling around the world on cargo ships for a few years, the two people I met on two separate occasions who had been kidnapped by Somali pirates and held for months by these pirates. They actually had some sympathy for the pirates, not in a sort of Stockholm syndrome kind of way, but they understood why the pirates were doing it, because they didn't have enough food to eat. Because without a military, without a navy, without a coast guard, which Somalia didn't have after 1991, because it all fallen into anarchy, They couldn't patrol their own waters. So fishing ships came from around the world, mostly China, but from around the world, and just sucked up all the fish in the shallows around Somalia because no one was there to tell them no. It went into the territorial waters of Somalia and took everything they could. So you had these local fishermen going out and not catching anything. They were starving. And they were like, what have we got? We've got a little canoe with an outboard motor and an AK-47. What can I do with that?
Mm.
Well, those cargo ships haven't got any arms on board. Let's go take them and hold them hostage.
And bear in mind, this has a lot of like implications because at the moment, I don't know if people know, we have got a medicine shortage.
Yes.
In the UK.
Yes.
The Department of Health has been announcing since this has started more and more medicine shortages because like these shipments are carrying medicines, and because they don't be able to go through the the Suez Canal, they're having to go all the way around Africa. This is causing massive delays. So now you've got people
and the price is going up
for medicines,
for
operations.
I hear medicines that people take are on the autistic spectrum, and also ADHD medication and epilepsy medication. There's a shortage of that, and maybe some others I don't know. But it's horrible. It's a really, and it just shows like how precarious the world is, and it pisses me off that people look at the world and go, "Oh, I'm sorry, this is boring. This isn't enough. Let's mess some shit up and see what happens." I.e., vote for Brexit or vote for Trump. It's not. I don't think it's done necessarily out of malice or necessarily stupidity. I think a lot of it's done out of boredom, mate. They're like, "Oh well, I want exciting things to happen."
The lack of looking at the big picture sometimes, where this happens from. I think that is a lot of it.
Yeah.
It's one of those where it's just like you've got to look at the big picture here, because what if we don't like let's give the scenario now of the Houthis keep this up and we can magically press the button to stop everything happening in Gaza, which is seems to what people think we can somehow do. Let's say that happens. What's to stop now the great revival of the Socialist Republic of South Yorkshire going out and attacking international trade routes because we want independence for Yorkshire? It works for the Houthis. Why can't it work for us?
Yeah.
And this is it. You've got to there was going to be a response. They were constantly telling them, knock it off, or is there going to be a response? And this isn't the first time this has happened. 2016, they attacked ships in the Strait again. They were bombed by American aircraft. They stopped.
Yeah.
So this has happened before.
Yeah.
And it has to be sent the message around the world that you do not mess with international trade, you not mess with international shipping, because it has big consequences on things as we just mentioned. Medicine shortage currently happening in the UK. Egypt, with traffic down by 60%.
Going through I mean, once you start targeting innocent women and children, and men, I guess, as well, I always seem to miss them out. I think you lose your argument. And this goes for terrorists. I think target civilians. That is, it's beyond the pale. It goes for Israel. The fact that they're, not just taking out Hamas, they're taking out, for every one Hamas terrorist they're taking out, they're taking over 100 innocent civilians out. And that's just not that's it's not right. And I feel this way about the IRA or about the UK and its stupid empire or whatever done in the past. If innocent civilians are being killed. And this is why in Russia, like the fact that certainly for the first few months, Russia was killing hundreds of civilians in Ukraine, and Ukraine wasn't killing any civilians in Russia. And you look at that from the outside and go, who's in the right here? You know what I mean? Who's defending their own land and who's purposefully causing suffering for no reason in another country? Russia's already the biggest country in the world, but apparently it's not big enough. It needs half of Ukraine as well. So people are talking in the chat about mentioning about private prescriptions and things, and whether you can get them and how expensive they are. And also number 3 saying his medication is late. Sorry to hear that, mate. But also, we've got One Angry Pagan pointing out about this story about the Texas National Guard who are facing off against the federal the federal what are they called, the actual the
border guard,
DOJ. Sorry, is it the
the Texas border
Homeland
guard.
Security? Yeah, Texas border guard. There's a 2.5-mile stretch of the southern border in Texas that's been cordoned off. No, razor wired off from the feds, and some people have already died as a result of this. Some people trying to get out of Mexico have already died in this area as a result of this. This happened this week, and it's gone to the Supreme Court, but as an emergency, and they've gone, oh yeah, we'll look at that next week sometime. It's only an emergency.
Yeah,
but this is the sort of stuff that in America, this obsession with the southern border is nothing new. It's been going on for decades, and it's been used as a political football.
I mean, it goes all way back to Reagan. Reagan and the drug war.
Yeah,
big consequence of it.
Yeah. Franco Pioni saying this boredom is called complacency, along with a dollop of arrogance. Right? I think also a failure of imagination. Like, people can't imagine what it's like to live in these situations, so they're not sympathetic to the people who do, to refugees from Palestine or from Syria or from Ukraine. Well, actually, no, they were more sympathetic towards the people from Ukraine. Any idea why that might be, Ollie?
Racism, probably.
Oh, racism! There you go. You said it. Yeah.
They were the right coloured refugees.
Okay. God, got more sympathy for them. We can. I
mean, this is the other thing as well. That's, I mean, this is a great segue to go back into another topic. Pakistan.
Taliban in Pakistan.
A lot of Afghan refugees, when they saw what was going on at the airports, ran to Pakistan.
Yeah,
and they hoped that they could get refugee status through the UK embassy in Pakistan. However, those have now been delayed constantly to a point now where Pakistan has started deporting these people back into the waiting arms of the Taliban.
Jesus Christ.
This is one of the biggest stains on the British reputation ever, because these people were relying on us
to get
for
them
safety after having worked for the Afghan government, British Army.
Yeah. So they're marked because to the Taliban, these people are traitors who were helping the British against the Taliban. We said we would help them out. We haven't. And now we're dicking around, wasting hundreds of hours of parliamentary time trying to send nobody to Rwanda ever. I sent me a video today. Even if we do send anyone to Rwanda, they're going to be back after we spend literally tens of millions of pounds on court cases, because they'll just go straight to the international court and say, "Excuse me, Britain's not keeping up with the those obligations that we signed up to under international law," and they'll win. Of course, they'll win. And they'll come back.
Now this brings us into the Taliban in Pakistan.
Yes,
unfortunately, this is a worry, and this is quite a serious worry. But this is unfortunately Pakistan's own fault, because when we were operating, of course, in Afghanistan for years, the Pakistanis would continuously turn a blind eye to the fact that the Taliban would go across during the summer and start attacking, and then during the winter they would retreat back across the border, back into Pakistan, where they would recruit, buy more weapons for another summer offensive. And that happened again and again and again. Of course, remember where Osama bin Laden was found. Now, what has happened, that the Taliban have now regained Afghanistan, they have decided, Pakistan looks pretty tempting. We've got lots of recruitment. We've got bribing high-level officials. there is a big danger now that the Taliban could start to destabilize Pakistan to effectively try and take it over. And then the worry again becomes
Jesus
that,
Christ.
remember, Pakistan is a nuclear power. And now you've got the Taliban who have nuclear weapons.
Oh, mate, you're going to send me to bed with fucking nightmares tonight. I'm not going to sleep.
I know.
Could they have that
I've always said
much?
this, when you,
Could they have that much of a influence?
well, this has been the big question.
Are they Pakistani Taliban or are they Afghan Taliban who've come over into Pakistan?
It's both. It is Afghans who have been in Pakistan or gone to Pakistan to be trained by the Taliban and then join in sort of the campaigns. They've, like I say, the Taliban have actively recruited people in Pakistan as well. Like I said, the Pakistani government turned a blind eye to all this, and it's been a big question for a long time. How much did their intelligence services know about what was going on? How many people in the government knew what was going on? How many people were bribed? How many people were just took the money to turn a blind eye versus how many are, well, Manchurian candidates potentially? It's
Is this realistic? I mean, the population of Pakistan is huge, isn't it? It's 230 million compared with Afghanistan. It's like 40.
But this is potentially a threat now that could happen, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it, because you've got to think about situations like this, and you've got to think, well, how can we prevent Pakistan from being destabilized by the Taliban?
Yeah,
because you've got military solutions. Do we start providing Pakistan weapons so that they can fight off the Taliban more effectively? Do we, send a aircraft carrier, park it off Pakistan, and start helping them with airstrikes, things like that? Do we look at this diplomatically? Do we try and get the Taliban to knock it off? But to be honest, that's very, very optimistic that the Taliban is suddenly going to say, we've got a good chance to try and, take another country.
wow.
There's a lot of stuff we've got to worry about, and this could be a potential trouble point and a problem that they've sort of made for themselves, unfortunately. And we've got to watch out for things like this when these happen, and we've got to think of how do we solve it? Do we start engaging more with Pakistan, because that's what they're going to the US for? They've recently asked the US, can you help us out with the Taliban that are in Pakistan? So the US currently are helping them out. How much that aid and stuff is what it's going to look like, we currently don't know, because, believe it or not, Congress hasn't got around to it yet, because, well, they're worried about other things at the moment, namely the government potentially about to shut down the funding for Ukraine, the border money that the Republicans desperately want.
The fact that they've only passed, was it 23 bills in the last year? 23, which is the least they've ever passed, apart from that 1 year when they didn't sit for 9 months.
Yeah, so it's one of those. It's one of these things of, this is an area where you've got to look at it and you've got to think, well, how can we help? What way can we do it? And sometimes you have to look at it and not be afraid to go, maybe we help them out with airstrikes. Maybe we look at intelligence gathering effects. Maybe we look at that.
But then we risk making a bad situation worse,
because if Pakistan falls, then the Taliban could end up with a nuclear weapon, and the Taliban are going to use that nuclear weapon or nuclear weapons.
Or India will use a preemptive strike. Under Modi, I could see that happening. He has
that's another possibility.
He's not the greatest fan of the Islam religion, let's put it that way. And the cases of minority religious groups in India being persecuted and discriminated against since he became president is off the charts. The BJP is a Hindu nationalist party at the exclusion of everybody else, and he's gone so far as he doesn't want. He's made it clear that he does not want people who aren't Hindu to be regarded as Indian.
Mm.
He's
I
not
mean,
interested in the
he
secular
would
state.
probably authorize a first strike, or
Yes,
he would invade
but what I was going to say
under the
is
pretense of we're going in to stabilize the region.
there's other ways of supporting the government in Pakistan rather than blowing shit up, because you blow shit up, you risk, especially with an insurgent group like the Taliban, you risk making more recruits. You kill one innocent person, you've got 100 people who knew that person who go, right, I'm going to take up arms now against whoever fired that rocket. Who was it? Oh, well, it had US military written on it. It had made in Basingstoke written on it. Right, okay, let's go after them. So
yeah, so I wanted to bring that up because this is maybe not, and obviously this is one of the things where you've got to look forward, because this maybe not happen for maybe 10 years, but through those 10 years, what's going to happen between then and now that could make the Taliban more powerful in Pakistan? We talked about last week about the elections
yes,
that are going on, and the fact that one of the people being elected technically is in prison at the moment. And
Imran Khan.
you've got a bizarre moment of democracy, and the worrying point is all these things should just form over a perfect storm and just create more and more breeding grounds for more Taliban
But
recruits
but you
without.
know what creates groups like the Taliban and Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen? Poverty.
Mm.
If the UK and other countries, especially colonizing countries like we were, gave these places the correct amount of reparations that we fucking well owe them. Don't forget, when we got into India in 1600, was it?
Yep.
Under Queen Elizabeth I, India was the richest country in the world by quite a substantial margin. In fact, it was richer than all the countries in Europe at the time put together. And
There's
when
an
we
amazing
left
series
in the
by
40s, it was one of the poorest.
there's an amazing series, if you want a quick cover of that, is Extra History. They did a quick multi-part series. It's about 20 minutes. I think it's about 4 or 5 videos,
Yeah.
but it's very, very good watch. It will give you the sort of the full history about how the UK took over India.
Yeah.
But again, it's a bit of history that doesn't get covered in the
But
UK.
it's why international development funding is so important. Not loans, funding.
Yep.
Give these people money because we bloody owe it to them.
And bear in mind,
And if we don't invest, things like this fester.
Yeah.
And it's always in poverty-stricken areas where people are desperate, and that's where they fall for these criminal gangs of terrorists who say, hey, come here, do this thing. Manipulating people who have nothing to lose. Give people something to lose, and they won't go down this route. And I mean, building up the economy in Pakistan would probably destroy the Taliban quicker than all the airstrikes you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, it's troubling, when you think about some of these things and some of the stuff that could happen, resulting from these. But you're right. International aid, we were spending 0.7% GDP, I think it was.
Yeah, and then we took it down to 0.5.
Took it down to 0.5. Yeah. So we were spending, next to nothing on international aid. And this is why there should be a UN International Aid Development Agency.
Yes.
I really do think there should be an international UN aid development agency where instead of we spend our aid budget, it goes to them and then they can spend it. And they can have a lot more effect when you think every single country is spending, maybe 0.7% to that aid agency. They can do a lot of good.
Yeah.
They could do a lot of good.
I think if you were a colonial power, it should be more than that. Because a lot of that ancestral wealth that we have in this country the worth of this country, if you add everything together, had come from abroad. We didn't make it ourselves, and certainly the gold and the jewels on the crown of the king,
Mm.
They didn't come from our country. They came from someone else's country. We nicked them, and we didn't pay them properly. And then we still hold on to things like the Parthenon marbles and the Benin bronzes and the Rosetta Stone and say, right, these are ours now. You didn't. You weren't using them at the time. Just, which is, I mean, it's just beyond disgraceful, the behaviour. And it's not just Britain, by the way. France, Belgium. Belgium are having a big reckoning at the moment about their role in the Belgian Congo.
Yeah, it's a history that isn't taught as well in schools, because if you, like, say,
true.
when I was a wee lad in the 90s, you were taught in primary school, you did Romans and Vikings. Then you went on to secondary school, and then you did medieval history. You went from like the Norman conquest to the Industrial Revolution, and we did American West and Medicine Through Time for GCSE. You don't learn about this colonial history. You don't learn about these things unless you
don't learn about the crimes.
Study it.
I think I've told you this before. When I was doing 3 Blokes in the Pub, we went over to Belfast and we talked to one of the guys who worked on writing the Good Friday Agreement. He works at the Queen's University in Belfast now. And until that conversation, Ollie, I didn't know that the Irish population still hadn't recovered from the potato famine of the 1840s. I knew about the potato famine. I knew that Britain kept on exporting those potatoes and importing them into Britain so we could eat them while families, millions were starving. But I hadn't realised that the population, don't forget, it wasn't just people dying, it was people leaving Ireland at the time in that decade. Millions of people left. And the population still hasn't recovered to this day. I mean, how is that missed out in school? How do we suddenly skip that? How did I get GCSE in history, an A level in history, and studied history at university, and that fact never came along?
Well, like I say, even then at university, it can be wildly different what you study.
I studied Victorian politics. I learnt all about Robert Peel and Gladstone and Disraeli and Salisbury.
I mean, how many people know the history of like the South Seas bubble?
Yeah.
That we are still paying off that debt.
Yeah. And the Opium Wars, the 2 of them that we got Hong Kong out of. Yeah. People talk, we took down the flag in Hong Kong in 1997, Chris Patton there, giving the old salute. And you're like, we got that because we wanted to deal drugs, and the Chinese authorities didn't want us dealing drugs in their country. And so we blew them up, and we burnt down the Summer Palace in Beijing, one of the most beautiful buildings in the world, and we burnt it down. Us and the French teamed up. Another gang from across the county lines. We ganged up to force China to allow us to sell opium to their people. It is just like weapons grade scumbaggery, and we indulged in.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's just history that isn't taught, and I think if it was taught more, I think people would sort of maybe understand. Oh, maybe the British Empire wasn't actually that good a thing.
Yeah.
It's
BUFC is saying in the future we're going to look back on the Gaza genocide by Israel with the same shame we looked on the Irish famine. I think we're looking at it now. I don't think we need any hindsight on this. It's a fucking disgrace, and it's the worst of all possible worlds, because you have an absolute bloody right-wing lunatic scumbag like Benjamin Netanyahu who thinks that it's acceptable to go and do this kind of thing in charge of Israel.
One of the reasons why he's doing this is Netanyahu was put in by the right wing, the right wing government, because he was meant to be the big guy on security. Elect me and Israel will be safe.
Yeah, and then it wasn't.
He was got that because, remember, he was facing massive corruption charges. Yeah. If he loses, those corruption charges will come back, and he's probably going to end up in prison. Yeah. So that's another reason why he's, again, pushing so hard to try and regain his reputation as Mr. Big Security.
But
Otherwise, he goes to jail.
Yeah, exactly. Which he will go to jail. I mean, he'll be put on war crimes in The Hague. I'm pretty sure of it. There's enough Israelis who want him on there.
Trial at the moment, with South Africa putting that forward down in the Criminal Court of Justice, that's going very, very well apparently so far.
Good.
If you can see like bits and pieces of that sort of happening, but we'll see what happens with that. But no, I'm quite hopeful that will have a big impact as well when that happens.
And look, I've said this before as well, but we're gonna have to wrap up in a moment. I understand that people get like quite sort of defensive when you talk about the history of anyone's country and say you did this in the past, and they'll say knee-jerk reaction, I didn't do that. That wasn't me personally. You can't blame me for that. Why should I have to pay for that crime that was committed? And it's not about people paying or having to pay an extra tax or having to give some of your income to poorer places. It's about investing in those places now because we can. We've got the money to invest and it's worth our while to do that. It makes sense. But let's leave reparations to one side for a moment. And obviously I do support reparations. The very least we can do is know about this stuff. That isn't that the first, like, acknowledge that it happened. And there must be nothing more frustrating than for people, say from Armenia, that the Turkish do not acknowledge that the Armenian genocide ever happened. And you're like, but it did.
You know, Serbia.
What difference does it make now?
Acknowledge what they did in Kosovo.
Yeah. I mean, that was fairly recent history. That was in the 90s. But I mean, we're talking in the Armenian genocide, just something that happened 110 years ago almost. Like, it's a long time ago. Everyone involved in that is dead. And to not even acknowledge that happened and to make it so taboo in Turkey to even mention it, you could be put in jail for talking about it on the TV or radio or in a newspaper article. It's just like, that's not the way that we should be running things. And we need to learn from history, not run from it scared. So pull down the statues, put them in a museum, contextualize them, teach people what really happened. Sell all the second homes and give everyone some money, says Super Tiny 808. Totally agree. Right, is there anything else left to say, Ollie, or should we let you go?
No, that's it.
It's your mountain retreat. That office looks amazing, mate. Is that Yorkshire? Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a virtual
deepest, darkest Yorkshire. Someone did I tell you someone had a go at me for like having £1 million warehouse pad? Oh. And I'm like, it's a green screen.
What, green screen.
Literally a green screen.
Yeah. Like, you can see it there through my fingers. Oh, I'm disappearing.
Anyway.
So yeah.
But yeah, indeed. So anyway, thank you for joining us, and we'll be back next week with hopefully some more news, maybe some good news. I think we should have a section on this. What do you reckon, Ollie? We have to pick a good news story. But otherwise, it's just going to be famine, death, Trump, elections. Oh, it's going to be, we don't want to bring everyone down. So we'll try and think of like a nice story to end each week from now on. Should we do that?
Yep.
Okay. But I haven't got one off the top of my head.
Yes, sorry about that, but no, I think I've said this every single time. When you do look at foreign politics, it's it is more often bad than good, but that's just because the world is complex, unfortunately. And talking about these things are quite complex. They require very lot of thought, a lot of deep solutions, and sometimes the solutions aren't the easiest, and sometimes not the nicest ones, unfortunately, sometimes. But it's just that's the world. That's the reality.
On top of that, you only get the bad news. As I say, nothing bad happened in Burkina Faso today is never going to be headline news. I don't think anyone's going to watch us if that's what we just talk about. It was a lovely day in Tonga today. Everyone had a really good time. So anyway, yes, thanks for joining us, Ollie, and to everyone in the chat. And until next week, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye. Oh, don't forget to like on the way out. Bye.
Right. Bye.
Like.